Ta-ta! Hello kids! Welcome to another art lesson, and today we're gonna be trying something new because we're artists and we love experimenting. I'm not gonna be using markers for my art today. Instead, I'm gonna be using watercolors, and I'm gonna list what you need so you can pause this video, go and gather your materials, and then we can start. What we're gonna be using for watercolors, of course, a set of watercolors. Then we're gonna need a pencil to draw, and then we're gonna need a paper cup full of water. I also like using a palette to mix my colors when I'm doing watercolors or oil painting or gouache painting. So if you have a palette, go and grab that too. Don't worry, you can just use a plastic plate instead of a palette because it's basically the same thing. Also, we're gonna need a brush because watercolors are applied on the paper with a brush. The last thing we're gonna need is some paper towels because we need to clean our brush often when we're doing watercolors, and also we need to dry it sometimes. This video is gonna be a little long, so I'm just gonna talk about the techniques I use when I'm doing watercolors, and then I'm gonna speed up the video a little bit, and then I'm gonna try to finish my painting. You can pause the video whenever you want and catch up, or look what I'm doing and try to do the same, and then keep watching. The first thing we need to know about watercolors that we need a thicker paper than usual. Because if we use a thinner paper, it's gonna absorb the water really quickly and it's gonna start getting wavy and bumpy, and we don't want that. We want our paper to stay flat as much as possible. So I use thicker papers for watercolors. You can use any paper you want. It's not a rule. It makes things easier, but still, we can do art with whatever we have. Before we start painting with watercolors, we need to make a drawing, and usually that drawing is done with a pencil. Since it's almost Christmas time, I want to draw a Christmas tree with a lot of presents. And I'm gonna use my pencil very lightly because traditionally in watercolor we don't want to see the pencil marks once we're done with our painting. That's why we just draw them very lightly, just dark enough so that we can see what we drew. I mean, this is the traditional way and there are no rules in art, so you can do whatever you want. If you want to draw your drawing darker, you can just go ahead and do that, but I mean, I'm just trying to teach you the traditional way. The second rule we need to pay attention to when we're doing watercolors is that we need to use a lot of water because watercolors are done with water. It's not like we can't just dip our brush to those colors and because they're gonna be dry. That's why I'm gonna be dipping my brush very often in my cup full of water, and I'm going to be rinsing my brush each time I'm changing the color that I'm painting with. The third thing we need to keep in mind when we're doing watercolors is that once we paint an area, we actually have to wait for a little bit for that area to dry. Because if we just keep putting paint over paint on our paper, I mean, it's really gonna get wet and it's gonna be unpleasant, it's gonna be wavy and bumpy. So once we paint an area, first we have to wait for a little bit before we move on. A very useful technique while we're doing watercolors is going from light to dark colors. So what does that mean? I start with coloring the lightest areas of my painting, and then I'm gonna jump to the middle tones. Once I'm done with the middle tones, I'm gonna paint the darkest parts of my painting. If we start painting our drawing with the darker tones, and if we make a mistake, there's no going back. I mean, we cannot take back those strokes, we cannot erase them, so it's always safer to start with the lightest tones and then jump onto the middle tones and then apply the darker tones. When we're painting with watercolors, we're kind of free. I mean, we can paint loosely. We don't have to be so scared of making small mistakes because those little mistakes are going to give a little texture to our painting. Also, don't be afraid to leave little white areas here and there because those are going to look nice too and they're going to add texture to our painting. I don't start with the details. I mean, that's valid for every piece of art. We always start with the bigger shapes, but as we are building up our painting, we start getting into details more and more, and our shapes and brush strokes starts to get smaller and smaller, and that's the part we start to add textures and patterns to our painting. I'm gonna assume the light is coming from the top. So, I'm gonna paint the top parts of the objects lighter and the bottom parts of the objects darker. We actually learned all that stuff before, kids. Like in our previous videos, we talked about perspective and patterns and textures and also light and dark areas, shading and shadows. So, if you didn't watch those videos yet, you can go ahead and check them out. And that's pretty much it with watercolors. I told you every technique that I know, and I hope you can just follow the video and create something similar. And I'm sure you're gonna be a lot better than me at watercolors very fast.